sure how this is going to work because the main thing is the slideshow, which is up here, because it's depicting the verses. Although today I did something a little different, and it's something I won't do next time. So we learn, we learn from experience what works and what doesn't work. So I tried to superimpose on some slides, and it got chaotic. So I will learn from the experience. So today we're going to be studying Srimad Bhagavatam. We're actually in the very end of the second canto, so I'm going to do an overview of the second canto altogether, because we've just gone through 10 chapters, and the verses, I'm doing a few verses at the end because they're really, really short, and they're really kind of talking about the next canto. So they're getting us ready for the next canto in these verses. It's Canto 2 is the cosmic manifestation, and Chapter 10 is the Bhagavatam is the answer. It answers all questions, and we're doing shlokas 48 through 51 to complete this wonderful 10th chapter. Text 48. Shaunaka Uvacha. Shaunaka Uvacha. Yad. Aha. No. Bhavan. Sutta. Yad aha no Bhavan Sutta. Shata. Bhagavato Tama. Shata Bhagavato Tama. Chachara Tirtani Uvas. Chachara Tirtani Uvas. Jaktva Bandun Sudushta Tyajan. Jaktva Bandun Sudushta Yajan. Shaunaka Uvacha. Yad ahano bhavan sutta. Kshata bhagavato tamaha. Chachara tirtanatni bhuvas. Chachara tirtani bhuvas. Tyaktva bandhunu shudustyajan. Others?
Yadahano bhavan sutta.
Yadahano bhavan sutta.
Shata bhagavato tamaha.
Shata bhagavato tamaha.
Chachara tirtani bhuvas.
Chachara tirtani bhuvas.
Jaktva bandhum sudustyajan.
Jaktva bandhum sudustyajan.
Yadahano bhavan sutta.
Yadahano bhavan sutta. Shata bhagavato tamaha. Chachara tirtani bhuvas. Jaktva bandhum sudustyajan. Shaunaka Uvacha. Yadahano bhavan sutta. Shata bhagavato tamaha. Chachara tirtani bhuvas. Jaktva bandhum sudustyajan. Shaunaka Uvacha. Yadahana bhavan sutta. Shaunaka Uvacha. Sri Shaunaka Muni said. Yat, as. Aha, you said. Na, unto us. Bhavan, your good self. Sutta, O Sutta. Shata, Vidura. Bhagavata, Uttama, one of the topmost devotees of the Lord. Chachara, practiced. Tirtani, places of pilgrimage. Bhuva, on the earth. Tyaktva, leaving aside. Bandhun, all relatives. Sudustyajan, very difficult to give up. Shaunaka Rishi, after hearing all about the creation, inquired from Sutta Goswami about Vidura, for Sutta Goswami had previously informed him how Vidura left home, leaving aside all his relatives, who were very difficult to leave. So repeat after me. Shaunaka Rishi, after hearing all about the creation, inquired from Sutta Goswami about Vidura. For Sutta Goswami had previously informed him how Vidura left home, leaving aside all his relatives, who were very difficult to leave. Purport. The rishis headed by Shaunaka were more anxious to know about Vidura, who met Maitreya Rishi while traveling to the pilgrimage sites of the world. And then we'll be going right on along. I'm going to read the translation of the next verse, and that's a few verses actually. Shaunaka Rishi said, "Let us know, please, what topics were discussed between Vidura and Maitreya, who talked on transcendental subjects, and what was inquired by Vidura and replied by Maitreya. Also, please let us know the reason for Vidura's giving up the connection of his family members, and why he again went home. Please let us know the activities of Vidura while he was in the places of pilgrimage." Purport. Sri Sutta Goswami was narrating the topics of the creation and destruction of the material world, but it appears that the rishis headed by Shaunaka were more inclined to hear of the transcendental subjects which are on a higher level than the physical. There are two classes of men, namely those too addicted to the gross body and the material world, and others on the higher level who are interested more in transcendental knowledge. Srimad Bhagavatam gives facility to everyone, both to the materialist and to the transcendentalist. By hearing Srimad Bhagavatam in the matter of the Lord's glorious activities, both in the material world and in the transcendental world, men can derive equal benefit. The materialists are more interested in the physical laws and how they are acting, and see wonders in those physical glamours. Behind the physical law is the direction of the complete consciousness of the Supreme Lord. Otherwise, things cannot take shape so systematically. The artist draws a picture of a rose very nicely with all attention and artistic sense, and yet it does not become as perfect as the real rose. It just right away, because I had taken that little video of you see the bee buzzing and the night blooming Sirius. I took that video in the early morning one morning. But it reminds me of a story because I immediately got distracted by the motion. And it reminds me of a story here in Hawaii with Srila Prabhupada on the beach. And one of the boys that were with him on the walk was distracted by a crab walking they could walk sideways. And he was super, he wasn't paying attention to Srila Prabhupada at all. He was distracted. And I saw what happened to my consciousness as soon as I saw the motion, my eye went to it. Because when I patched it in earlier, it was just a picture, but it's actually a video, so it really distracted me, and how easy action can just pull us into itself. And it's just fascinating. Prabhupada mentioned that kind of distraction, we require focus. He mentioned that we need to bring our consciousness back and not be so distracted. This sort of conclusion is due to a poor fund of knowledge. One must know from the above description of creation and annihilation that the Supreme Consciousness, being omnipresent, can take care of everything with perfect attention. One must know from the above description of creation and annihilation that the Supreme Consciousness, being omnipresent, can take care of everything with perfect attention. That is the fact of omnipresence of the Lord. After all, he's in the heart of every living entity as the super soul. You can see he's there in every single body, even the worm body. I have so many spirit souls in the worm farm in the back that Steve's feeding. And they're feeding Tulsi, so it's amazing how the Agyata Sakriti of the devotees will bring even a worm into service. Persons still more foolish than the gross materialists, however, claim to be transcendentalists and claim to have such supreme, all-pervading consciousness, but they offer no proof. Prabhupada said we should be sincere as a sincere street sweeper and not like a charlatan meditator, somebody who feigns that, oh, I'm such a great spiritualist. And so I put this picture, because he also talked about when we go off and do our meditation. We had one lady who came, and she was with the, what's that persuasion? It's really it's a intense yogic persuasion, but she spent all her time sleeping. I would knock on her door and ask her to come to the programs, and she would be, you could tell, she'd come to the door completely sleeping. So we may not be achieving meditative stillness. We might be just falling asleep. So such foolish persons cannot know what is going on behind the next wall. We don't know what's going on in the kitchen. Yet they are falsely proud of possessing the cosmic, all-pervading consciousness of the Supreme Person. For them also, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam is a great help. It will open their eyes to see that simply by claiming the Supreme Consciousness, one does not become supremely conscious. One has to prove in the physical world that he has such supreme consciousness. The rishis of Naimisharanya, however, were above the gross materialist and the false transcendentalists, and thus they were always anxious to know the real truth of the transcendental matters, as discussed by the authorities. We all know that at the onset of Kali Yuga, in one place I saw 88,000 rishis assembled, and another I found 64,000 rishis assembled at the forest of Naimisharanya. And the forest of Naimisharanya was a forest university. They were intensely studying the Vedic scriptures, and these rishis were all very, very self-realized souls, and they came there with the sole purpose. They knew that Kali was coming upon us. Kali Yuga was about to manifest. So they set out for 12 whole years to hear the pastimes of the Lord as a great sacrifice and penance to try to offset what disasters were coming. They knew Kali Yuga had become so difficult in this age. So the great sages, like Prabhupada said, he gave us the qualification by which we can hear and chant and share this Krishna consciousness. He gave us his own adhikar. Adhikar is the word for qualification. So we're so blessed when we come in contact with the great personality that can bring us along. This forest of Naimisharanya, Aranya, Naimi is like glint, and Aranya is in the forest. So they were getting enlightenment in the forest, and the collective energy that was concentrated in that spot by those rishis, so there's so many thousands of rishis, it created a major holy place. But even before that, Naimisharanya was the place that the rishi Dadachi had given up his body. He was, Indra was having a big trouble, and he was losing the heavenly wars, and the demons were inhabiting the entire universe. So it was told to him by his guru that you need this particular weapon that needs to be fashioned out of the bones of a Brahmin. But who was going to donate his bones? You had to say, okay, I'm giving you my life. So there was one very, very famous sage who said, yes, I will give you my life, my bones, they're yours, because I know that it'll do huge service to the entire hierarchy and put everything back into balance again. So on this spot of Naimisharanya, that sage had also given up his body in the past. So Naimisharanya, or the Naimishar forest, is an ancient forest mentioned in the Mahabharata and the Puranas. It lays on the bank of the Gomti River of Uttar Pradesh, about 90 kilometers from Lucknow. The narration of the current version of the Mahabharata that we have today took place at Naimisharanya during a conclave of sages headed by Shaunika, who gathered for a 12-year-long sacrifice. In this conclave, Uglashrava Shauti narrated the entire Mahabhagavad. It is considered to be the ashram of Rishi Dadachi, who gave away his life by donating his bones for the creation of Indra's weapon, Vajra, which was latter used to kill. He was a great demon, but he was very powerful, Vritasura. The sages were looking to perform penance, so Brahma brought out a ring of kusha grass, and he asked the sages to perform the penance on the place where the ring fell. And it fell right there at Naimisharanya. The sages performed penance, and Vishnu appeared to the sages and accepted their offerings. And they say that forest of Naimisharanya, all the trees are sages, just like the rishis and sages, just like in the forest where Lord Ramachandra was exiled to the forest. All those trees are sages, and those sages fell in love with Ram, and they fell amorously in love with him, witnessing his pastime. So Ram promised them in the incarnation of Krishna, he would satisfy their desire, and they actually took birth as gopis. There are several sets of gopis. The rishis were one of them, and there were the apsaras that fell in love with Narnarayan in Badrinath when Indra sent all these beautiful apsaras to try to tempt Narnarayan out of meditation. Narnarayan is Krishna. He's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, so he wasn't about to be tempted by the likes of the God of Heaven. That's like substandard. And what he did was he slashed his thigh, and out came damsels that were so beautiful that the apsaras felt embarrassed. They were ashamed. They slunk away, but they said, the problem is we're already madly in love with you. What are we going to do about that? So they were also promised to become the gopis. And in Sevakunj and the different forests of all of Raj, all the trees are gopis. They're considered so auspicious. So never underestimate the forest. Who's there? Who is there? Who's bearing witness? In the Ramayana, according to the Ramayana, Naimisa was situated on the Gomati River. The sanctity attached to the place was such that Rama desired to celebrate the ashram, made a sacrifice in this forest. Accordingly, placing his younger brother Lakshmana, assisted by the priests in charge of the steed himself, he went to the forest. It was during the sacrifice that Valmiki with his disciples came there and constructed some comfortable huts at a distance. Then Love and Kush recited the whole Ramayana, which convinced Ram that they were the twin sons of Sita. Ultimately, Mother Earth appeared at Sita's invocation and, proving her innocence, accompanied her into the bowels of the earth. So when something happens in a holy place, it is understood. Like when they were excavating all the holy places in Vraj, many very sacred things happen on that place. Even the Ramayan was also recited on the place of Naimisharanya. Shloka 51 is, we'll read the translation. Sri Sutta Goswami explained, I shall now explain to you the very subjects explained by the great sage in answer to King Parikshit's inquiries. Please hear them attentively. Purport. Any question that is put forward may be answered by quoting the authority. That satisfies the senior section. That is a system even in the court of law. The best lawyers give evidence from the past judgment. And it's off the page here, so let's see. So the court accepts it rather than trying to take so much trouble to establish a case. That's called precedence. When they say, can you find praman or evidence or some other case in the history of court cases that has already made a judgment? So they refer to these cases as precedents. And so in the court of law, precedence is used, and in the Vedas, praman or evidence that this place is so holy that so many far out things have happened there. And in the history of humankind, what has been recorded, we may not know everything that has taken place here on this particular spot in Hawaii, because this is a Dham here too. This is New Navadvip Dham. Srila Prabhupada says, Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha Anadir Adir Govinda Sarva Karana. And he says in the purport, let us all obey the Supreme Lord, whose hand is in everything without an exception. And I was just reading, because so much about this was, they're inquiring about Vidura and why he left home. And it was actually, Vidura was, as we all know, he was an incarnation of Yamaraj, the Lord of Death. And I was reading something very interesting today, because we had gone to Badrinath, and right in back or Kedarnath, right in back of Kedarnath it's called the Mahapant. It's the stairway to heaven that both Shankaracharya and the Pandavas ascended to heaven on that stairway. And in reading about Dharmaraj, Yamaraj, and then also the Pandavas, it was there's so much backstory to that, because when Dhritarashtra and Gandhari and Kunti went to the forest to renounce, to retire from householder life and kingly existence and the royal court business and all of that, later the Pandavas found Vidura lifeless, but a voice came from the heavens, don't bury him, because he was actually just in a state of Jai Shri Shri Panchatattva, a state of non-animation. So later on, when the Pandavas were, they themselves had retired, and they were on their way to, they wanted to get exonerated from the problem of killing their family members. So they had approached Lord Shiva, and that's immortalized and memorialized by the temple Kedarnath there that the Pandavas built before they ascended the pathway to heaven. But on that pathway, Yudhisthira, a dog started to tag along with Yudhisthira. And as they went on their stairway to heaven, the various Pandavas started to pass away. And as they were passing, they were asking, what was my fault? Why didn't I make it to heaven? And each one was taught something about how they could improve, what they could do better. And in the very end, when Indra came and he said to Yudhisthira, I'll take you to go. And he said, but I won't leave my brothers and sisters, and I won't leave my dog. My dog has been faithful. You may want to take me. And Indra was saying, but don't worry, you'll see them in heaven in their self-same bodies. You won't be abandoning them. And he said, but this dog is with me. And Indra was trying to tell him, there's no dogs in heaven. You can't bring him. And he said, well, then I'm not going. I really don't want to go anyway. I didn't have an aspiration to go to heaven. So as it goes, that actually this dog was Yamaraj, he was Dharmaraj. So he appeared, he came out of the dog form, and he was told that you are so loyal, you're so good to your dependents, you're such an honorable person. He was known as being so honorable. And he was also the son of, he was also called Dharmaraj himself, and he was the son of Yamaraj. So it's very, very interesting, the pastimes of the Pandavas. Along that trail, Arjuna had to give up his weapons because the fire god came and said, okay, you've got that Gandiva bow, I awarded it to you, so you're going to heaven anyway, you're not going to need it, so why don't you throw it in this lake and Varuna will take charge of it. So as we're leaving, we have to shed all of our opulences, all of our tools, and if we're really going back to Godhead, if we're really going to Krishna's, even the Pandavas are known that they always go and they always go to where Krishna's manifest pastimes are taking place. They're eternal associates of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So they're always when they're finished this life, they give it all up, let it all go, and go right to where Krishna is going to be having his pastimes. But in so doing, they even have to shed their own opulences. They have to have the ability to give up the things that made them amazingly famous and capable and strong. And they also have to face their faults. So can you imagine one little fault? There's a part of it is Indra had to take, he promised Yudhisthira that he would take him to his brothers. And he took him to a very scary, hellish, horrible place that was frightening. And he could hear his brothers and his wife's voice. He could hear his family member's voice. And Yamaraj explained to him that everybody who has a fault has to have a look at hell. They have to take a look at it. I found it in the folio, this whole pastime. I was like, wow, yikes. So be prepared to see the dark side of the force, and let it all go. Understand, and it was explained to be illusion. It was explained to be that it was something we have to pass through so we gain more understanding of. So he then went with his brothers and his wife. It was interesting, his wife's fault was she had no faults at all, except for she had 5 husbands, but she preferred Arjuna. That was a fault. That was her fault. Bhima, his eating, he was voracious. He was known as a voracious eater, and when he ate, he didn't have any concern for others. He just ate like ferociously. And Sahadev, he was very proud of his knowledge. He was very, very intelligent. So it says in the Bhagavad Gita, in this world, to every endeavor there is a flaw. It is what helps us become humble. We all need humility. It's like so important. So we have only 5 minutes to review the entire canto of 2nd canto. So let's just read through the chapters because you can see how it develops. The first chapter is the first step in God realization, and it was really a huge meditation on the Virataru. The chapter 2 was the Lord in the heart. Chapter 3, pure devotional service, the change of heart. This is what we're all Please, Lord, let my heart change. Let me become soft-hearted and a loving devotee. Chapter 4, the process of creation. Chapter 5, the cause of all causes. Chapter 6, Purusha Sukta confirmed. The Chapter 7, scheduled incarnations with specific functions. We've really covered a lot of territory. Chapter 8, questions by King Parikshit. Chapter 9, answers by citing the Lord's version. And Chapter 10, Bhagavatam, is the answer to all questions. In Chapter 1, the first step in God realization, we covered success in chanting and developing a service attitude, and how chanting is really at the basis of everything. Where by chanting, we're asking that, please, Lord, please may I serve you, please may I serve you. And we're getting so many realizations that are coming about. And it's understood that when we read the scriptures, those realizations that are coming out by the mantra meditation become confirmed. We can really understand the scriptures because we chant. And if we're not chanting, our progress will be less aha. You know, it's like we have that aha, like, wow, yes, I got that, you know. So we want to have those aha moments, you know. And we want to develop a sweet service attitude where we really enjoy serving. In Chapter 1, there's also, we cover the planetary systems and the universal form and demigods as part of the body of the Lord. We understand that everything is part and parcel of Krishna. And it's a real meditation on the universal form of the Lord, Vishwarupa meditation. And this verse was in Chapter 1. O descendant of King Bharat, one who desires to be free from all miseries must hear about, glorify, and also remember the personality of Godhead, who is the super soul, the controller, and the savior from all miseries. It's lovely, lovely verse. Chapter 2, a review of Chapter 2, we see that the Lord in the heart, and we look around and we become detached from this world of names, these things that we feel that we're now transferring the account to Krishna consciousness instead of all the consciousness of this, that, and the other. And so we get very strongly fixed in super soul meditation, seeing the super soul in every living entity, every living being, the soul is there. And then we talked about leaving the material body. That is super important because it's a final exam. And where we may be going if we have had a life of service to Brahmaloka or to Vaikuntha, to the heavenly planets, or to Vaikuntha, we go to the place where you don't return. So we would like that. And so attraction for Krishna is key. Need and desire, attraction for Krishna is key to that change of heart. In Chapter 3, which is pure devotional service, the change of heart is there again. We need to always be in that state where our heart is softening and attracting to Krishna. And we realize that everyone's worshiping Krishna. Everyone. Prabhupada, when he was asked, how many devotees are there? And he said, unlimited. Some are admitting and some are not. And we may admit we are in 1 minute and be totally in Maya the next. It happens. We've got that Tatastha Shakti. We go undulating between Yoga Maya and Mahamaya. So still, the devotee who's Uttama sees Krishna in everything. And for a real devotee, we only want to talk about Krishna. We don't want to find fault. Finding fault is the worst thing for our devotional life. It is the weediest weed patch of all time to be finding fault. So that's something, it's a theme I'd like to talk about a lot more. Every single time I talk, it's like, let's talk about something positive and not find fault, because that leads us to pure devotional service. In Chapter 4, the process of creation is revealed, and Parikshit is asking a lot of questions about it. And the next part was devotees purify the fallen souls. The mercy of the devotee, that's getting us out of the material world. and praying for merciful empowerment, just like Srila Prabhupada did when he came over on the Jaladuta. A devotee is always praying for empowerment to touch the hearts of every living entity, whoever they come in contact. Maharaj was just saying in class the other day, Kanista is one who's chanting and following. And the Madhyam is one who's chanting all the time, chanting all the time, 24 hours a day. They're chanting and chanting. And Uttama is someone who's chanting all the time, and just by meeting them, you want to chant. Wow. I mean, I just love that definition. I was like, I'm going to memorize that. There was something that you said this morning, too, that I want to go back and research, because there's so many like, I got to remember that. That's super important, rather than other things. So we become empowered to just touch the hearts of everyone. So in chapter 5, we're realizing who is the cause of all causes. Okay, is it our karma? Yes, we've got some heavy karma that we've got to work out. But Narada is asking a lot of questions. So we shift here now to a relationship between Lord Brahma and Narada. And Narada is asking, it's no longer Maharaj Pariksit. And the Lord is empowering Brahma. And Brahma is the first created living entity, and there's no one else, and what he has to go through is something, and so we read all about that. And Narayan is the actual, and I misspelled it, creator. He is the actual creator, and Brahma, who's said to be the creator, is a sub-creator. He's got the plans and the materials, and he's been contracted by the Lord to create this whole thing. Sarga, that's the creation. Visarga is the secondary creation. Vishnu enters the elements. Without the Lord being, the Lord is in the space between us. He's in our hearts. He's everywhere. So the Vishvarupa, that this meditation on the universal form of the Lord, it's important. In chapter 6, the Purusha Sukta confirmed the opulences of the Vishvarupa, how everything is connected to the Lord, and that the Vishvarupa covers everything. Everything's in him. He's like the sun. Everything's radiating out from him. And that all our actions should be done as Lord Brahma. He heard the word tapa, as penance, as a sacrifice to the Lord. If he's the boss and the king and the sub-creator of everything, and he's doing tapasya, he's a servant, what are we? We might as well relish it. So, to catch the Lord's lotus feet, I'm seeing several misspells here. Every being is part of Krishna's energy. So in chapter 7, we went through scheduled incarnations with specific functions. We looked at the Leela avatars, Lord Ram, Lord Krishna, the Kali Yuga incarnations, and the Guna avatars. So this is what we've been covering. In chapter 8, Maharaj Pariksit is asking questions. He saw Krishna in the womb. The picture there is Maharaj Pariksit is seeing Krishna in the womb, and in the last bit of his life, he's so determined that he is even being bitten by a snake bird, and he's still determined to focus on Krishna. His whole life was spent looking, where is Krishna? How is anything related to Krishna? From womb to the finish of his life, it's all about Krishna. So in chapter 9, Answers by Citing the Lord's Version, we hear about Brahma's austerities, we hear about the Vaikuntha Lokas, and how the Lord is pleased with Lord Brahma and his inquiries and questions. And then we get to hear those famous Chatrasloki, those verses. They're very dense, compact verses that explain everything in relation to Krishna. And chapter 10, which we're finally concluding today, and tomorrow we'll begin Canto 3. This is the chapter where Bhagavatam answers all questions. And there are 10 subjects that are known to human beings that are covered in this chapter, and how Vishnu expands himself, and then more about the universal form, creation, maintenance, and destruction. And that is the final point, the final discussion on Canto 2. So tomorrow we'll be studying Canto 3. Are there any questions or comments?
Wonderful.
I have a question.
Yes.
You mentioned about the Pandavas. So the question is, because they were seeing the Lord, they were personal associates of the Lord. So instead of going directly to that home, why did they go to heaven?
Well, they had, we were reading about in first canto and about how completely distressed they were when Krishna disappeared. It was dreadful. They were there were so many bad signs. They were like, what is happening? Even Mother Earth was lamenting the fact that Krishna's footprints aren't, he's not walking on my surface. The Pandavas were lamenting Krishna's gone, and so what is the point? And they felt they needed to exonerate themselves from killing all of their kinsmen. And they were really, it was kind of at a loss. Even the whole Yadu dynasty killed each other. They went mad, got drunk, and started killing each other. So they were really in a position of, well, what can we do now? So they figured, well, we just have to retire to the forest, take pilgrimage, and get exonerated. They just were dutiful. And so, but of course they want to be with Krishna all the time. And they were like, where is Krishna, where is Krishna? It's a mood, the gopis' mood, Vidura's mood, the Pandavas' mood, where is Krishna? The earth's mood, where is Krishna? That even the rishis' mood in the forest, they fall in love with Krishna, madly in love. And when he goes away in the Vipralamba Bhav, they're mad after Krishna. They're still mad, and they're still talking about his pastimes. They're still reminiscing everything about him. And Queen Kunti was saying, what is the good of all this kingly business without Krishna? We've got the kingdom, whoop-de-doo. I'm not interested in this. I want Krishna and tons of calamity. Prayers of Queen Kunti are famous that way. When Krishna disappeared, that was the main reason. They're like, oh my goodness, we're talking about Krishna, but we've got to do something, go to the forest. That was a traditional thing that was done. And when they found the Mahapanth, they built that temple in Kedarnath, they started to ascend. And then they were given some assistance, but their lives are continuously in relation to Krishna. But sometimes he disappears, like we were just discussing that Radharani, she was out on a limb because all of a sudden Krishna disappeared because she felt some pride, I'm with Krishna. So according to his sweet will and what we have here in the very last verse of Shikshashtakam, even if he handles me roughly by his embrace, by making me brokenhearted, or not being present before me, still he is my Lord unconditional. So when Krishna disappears, it's the worst thing that could happen. And we don't even know that yet. We're not even there yet. We're fortunate to be here in the association of the deities and the saintly people and the scriptures so that we can hear about that. We can become more and more addicted to Krishna, that we can't live without him. Hare Krishna. Any other questions or comments? Hare Krishna. All glories to Srimad Bhagavatam. Hare Krishna.
Yeah.